welcome to this Raymond James webinar. My name is Pavel Molchanov, Research Analyst. With us for the webinar is KULR Technology Group, ticker KULR. From the company, we have Michael Mo, the CEO. We will have a fireside chat with some questions for Michael. And if you would like to ask a question, please type it in using the Q&A function in Zoom, and I will be glad to ask it on your behalf in the latter half of the call. So let me hand it over to Michael to give a quick kind of 3 to 5 minute overview of the KULR technology story. Michael?
Hey, Pavel. Hey, thank you so much. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for spending time with us today. My name is Michael Mo. I'm the co-founder, CEO of KULR Technology Group. Quick introduction about KULR Technology. We come from over 30 years of heritage of developing carbon fiber-based thermal management solutions for aerospace and defense applications. Our products are trusted by NASA, and it's used on the Mars rover 2020 Perseverance rover. It's used on the International Space Station to protect the astronauts' laptop safe, and also numerous different aerospace and defense applications. Our mission is to take these space-proven technologies and apply them to the world of lithium-ion batteries and electronics to keep them cooler, lighter, and safer. Our customers include the likes of Lockheed Martin and other commercial customers, and we use this technology to target multiple billion-dollar markets, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And our management team have decades of experience in technology product development, marketing, and manufacturing, scale manufacturing, and public company finances. So, Pavel, that's a quick introduction about us, and happy to get more depth into conversations.
Okay, thank you for that. So let me zoom out by asking about kind of the core technological problem of lithium-ion batteries that you're trying to solve, which is fire risk. Why is it? And we've all seen the pictures of Tesla cars burning, and occasionally batteries on the electric grid catching fire as well. Why does this happen? Right? There's no gasoline. We don't have any obvious flammable kind of situation with batteries. So why do we have these fires that are constantly occurring?
Yeah. I hear some echo around that. Wonder if it's me or not. Do you hear some echo?
It's fine. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Yeah. So the basic safety problem that you're talking about is called thermal runaway. That occurs in the battery when the cathode and anode gets shorted and the liquid electrolyte catches fire. So that's the chemical reaction that causes the thermal runaway event in the battery cell. And then when you have the catastrophic event of like you mentioned, the car catches fire, energy storage, and that's when a thermal runaway propagates. They call it thermal runaway propagation from one cell to all the cells next to it. So as you may know that, Tesla cars like Model S has over 7,000 of these cells in there. So when one of the cells catches fire, propagates to neighbors, and then before you know it, hundreds of cells start lighting up. So, and this thermal runaway event happens due to a number of factors. It could be in a car crash. Then it's the actual mechanical, intrusion into the cell. So the cell gets crushed. Something in the middle of the cell called the separator gets damaged, and then you have the cathode and anode start touching each other. That's the phenomenon that happened, in the car crash. Actually, that's the root cause for the Samsung Galaxy 7 recall a few years back. And then so that's the kind of a build, the mechanical damage. And then there's overcharging and overheating of the cell. So sometimes you hear tragic events like people are charging their hoverboard or e-bikes in their apartments or garage, and then because the BMS and the battery management system is not very well built, overcharge the battery, damage the internal of the cell, catches thermal runaway. The most common one would be an internal defect. So some of the cells, because it's out of one out of a few million, so it's 10 to the 6 order magnitude opportunity for that to happen. That just due to a manufacturing defect, that the separator will be damaged, and then you catch fire as well. So even though it's one out of X number of millions, because there's so many batteries in use, we're talking about billions and billions of batteries, then these, the battery thermal runaway occurs more often than not. That would be the root cause for these, battery explosion and fire events.
Okay, I mean that's a useful explanation. I suppose it begs the question: why have the battery manufacturers, Panasonic, LG, CATL, right? All these giant conglomerates. Why have they not figured out over a period of 30 years, which is how old lithium-ion technology is, to eliminate this fire risk?
Yeah, I think it's just a pure, kind of a numbers game. It's just so many cells, right? I think something like tens of billions of cells are being made, every year. As mature as this technology is, you're always going to have some manufacturing defect. In this case, is one out of, I think I've seen statistics, 1 out of 6 million. So that's really good. I mean, there are very, very few products that you can say that is 1 out of 6 million defects. But the unfortunate truth is that when these defects happen, the result is catastrophic. And therefore, it's very visible. Other defects, clothing or other consumer electronics, doesn't have that catching a fire consequence. So it's less visible, and then you have the external events such as the car crash or damage and so forth. Hoverboard is an interesting case. This is where, you have these cells, so you have these batteries in a hoverboard. Hoverboard rides on, pavement, and then it's pretty rough conditions, and usually kids riding it jump up and down. So these batteries are in use, right? And they're probably overheating when they're in use, and they're getting mechanical vibrations and shocks and all that. So increase the chance of them getting damaged while in use. And they're, low-cost products, pretty price sensitive. So they probably don't have the best technology put in there to protect the batteries. And then it gets damaged, much easier. And hoverboard was a pretty kind of infamous case last couple of years, or a couple of years back, that catches fire more often than not, and so they got banned. Getting on the plane, getting banned for shipment from Amazon, and you all start coming in having regulations, certifications, and consumer safety protection agency have a lot of tests. So we help them do a lot of tests around that, on certifications and test cases. So yeah, it's just a hard problem to solve. That's why the industry is trying to move to solid state electrolyte. The liquid electrolyte in a cell is kind of the root cause for this. A solid state electrolyte will solve this problem, but that's a hard problem to solve, and we're still at the early stages of that.
I want to get to the solid state solution a little bit later, but before we do that, so describe what specifically you provide as a company that will prevent batteries from catching fire. What is it? Is it a component that is added into the battery, or is it a material for the anode or cathode? What physically is the product that you are selling?
Yeah. So the solution that we've produced or we've developed to prevent the cell-to-cell propagation is a phase change material structure that's put inside the battery pack in between the cells and also in between the cells and the enclosure to prevent the fire and explosion to propagate. It's a so when a thermal runaway event occurs, our material takes away the heat and energy, so that keeps all the neighbor cells totally safe. And it's a totally passive solution. So they call it what NASA calls it the passive propagation resistant PPR solution, which means that it requires no active parts such as sensors, fans, or pumps that would pump liquid into it. So this thing just works on its own. That's very important for, especially for space applications, because the fault tolerant level for active parts is very, very. I mean, it's virtually zero to meet the space requirements and aerospace requirements, and they need components that will work for 10 years in space without any active monitoring. So we developed this technology alongside NASA Johnson Space Center, Dr. Eric Darcy and his group. So our parts on the International Space Station used to protect the astronauts' laptop batteries and tablets and their portable batteries on board the ISS. So fundamentally, that's technology. It's a phase change material structure to kind of do that. So that's kind of how we got into the lithium-ion battery safety business. Since then, we have developed and also acquired a number of different, complementary technology we want to put together to provide a whole suite of solutions to solve this thermal runaway problem. One technology we acquired actually from NASA is a technology called internal short circuit that is developed by NASA and DOE to implant a defect into the cell itself, in between the cathode and anode, with a phase change material that you can heat it up and then reliably induce a internal short to trigger the thermal runaway event in the battery. This is proven to be the most reliable and realistic way to trigger the thermal runaway event, and therefore, so you can test your battery pack to make sure it's safe when an internal short happens. That's a technology developed to test the astronauts' the spacesuit batteries. We became the exclusive licensee and commercialization partner for them in 2018, and we'll be marketing that to customers in EV, in electric aviation, in power tools, e-bikes since 2019. And this is something that we're also working with regulators to incorporate this technology into regulatory roadmaps, so that a lot of other customers in industry would get to it, and it can meet their certification needs. So in addition to that, we're developing. We announced a product called CellCheck that is a AI-based smart battery management system at the edge that, in combination with the ISC and the TRS parts that we have, to get all the data from the cell, from the battery pack, and then feed that back into the cloud, using AI algorithm to understand the conditions of the battery pack, and then give predictive and preventative information on thermal stability and safety on the battery itself. So that's a product we announced last year. We're going into beta testing with customers in first half of 2022, and we have a very high hope for that to ramp up in business in second half of 2022. So that's kind of we're putting together a suite of solutions from inside the cell, outside the cell, all the way to management, data, and AI to offer customer a holistic solution for battery safety.
So you mentioned that you started commercializing this for aerospace, including NASA, and I suppose it's pretty obvious why nobody would want the International Space Station to catch on fire. But why have the automakers, whether it's cars, buses, trucks, why have they been so slow to adopt this technology, even though, as we talked about a minute ago, consumers are, in some cases, avoiding EVs because of fire risk?
Yeah, I think it's multiple fronts. One is, as you know, that design into automakers takes a long, long time, right? Traditionally, design activities into traditional OEMs takes multiple years. Tesla has really sped up that process, from 5 to 10 years to 2 to 3 years. But still, when you're talking about a lot of legacy OEMs, it's multi-year design and testing process. And then just some of the example, right? Some of the customers that we've publicly talked about recently, Lockheed Martin and Volta Energy. So Lockheed Martin is in the aerospace and defense applications. I think 2 years ago, we talked about our engagement with Lockheed Martin. And then end of last year, we had a PR out with Lockheed Martin. They're adopting our PPR solutions for their next generation battery pack for their aerospace and DoD customers. So that was a 2-year engagement. And now we're getting to the next phase of design in and testing, right? And then we also talked about an energy storage customer called Volta Energy on their portable battery backup storage unit. That is, as for fire risk and safety, portable battery power that's in the residential homes, in hospitals and offices is probably as important as automotive, probably even more, because if that catches fire, you can burn down the whole building. So that design activity, we've worked with them for almost 3 years. It's 18 months of design and testing. Now we're getting a stage of getting certification from regulatory bodies, fire departments, insurance companies, etc. It's just a long design process. So the first answer to that is the design process is long. And number two, I think that until the most recent high profile auto recalls, the auto OEMs, when they have their, let's say, just for example, GM, right? Their Bold and Bold came out 5 years ago. I don't know exactly the timing, and that design activity happened probably 10 years ago for the vehicle to be on the market 5 years ago. So even the car's been in the market only for 3-5 years, but that design activity happened a long time ago. Back then, safety really wasn't a major design criteria, if you will, right? It's only the most recently that all these events starting to happen because the aging of the battery or just the pure volume increase. The math works now that hey, you're bound to have some issues with this. Just statistically speaking, now these things become brought to the forefront. So that's another kind of design timing and just kind of a timing thing. Third, I think is regulation. China just had their EV safety regulation became effective last year. It's called GTR 20. What it says is that basically is that if a battery is to catch fire in your EV, you need to allow a 5-minute warning to your passengers so they can park the car on the side, get everybody off the vehicle and to a safe place. And afterwards, if the car, is to catch fire and explode, not the greatest thing in the world, but that you passes the safety requirement because nobody got hurt. So that's kind of their requirement. And so far, Europe and the U.S. hasn't have their official safety requirement for EV yet, as far as I know. But I mean, everybody's working on it. Whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 30 minutes, everybody's working on it. So when you don't have that kind of official safety requirement, the EV OEMs are kind of free to do what they need to do, right? So it's like a kind of like a seatbelt situation, or air seatbelt or airbag situation. When the insurance companies and regulators didn't require it, it wasn't built into every car. So I think that may have something to do with that as well.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective. You mentioned the regulatory driver in China. Is there any prospect of the U.S. government, Department of Transportation, or any other regulator mandating something like this technology in domestically sold electric vehicles? And same question for the European Union.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely going to mandate some effect of the technology into the car, such as the car needs to have these safety features, such as something like a GTR 20, which is if the battery is to catch fire, you need to give the passenger enough warning, enough time warning when it's moving, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes, or that's up to discussion. Now, the other question is, what if the car is parked and just being charged in your garage in the middle of the night? I mean, is it reasonable to send a warning signal to the driver and say, hey, you need to move your car out because it's going to, bust into flames in 30 minutes? And that it's really not a great message to send. But those are things I would suspect that the regulators are working on. Nothing to my knowledge that is firmed up yet, but I'm pretty sure they're working on that. That's on the EV side, but other energy storage products will certainly already have a lot of certifications and regulatory bodies already in the mix of looking at that. Let's say energy storage, right? There are a few infamous incidents on energy storage, battery energy storage products catch fire. Arizona utility, that was 2019. That was a pretty bad one. And 9 first responders, if I remember correctly, got injured by responding to that. And then last year, Moss Landing in California here, I think it's a 300 megawatt energy storage facility, has smoke coming out. Certain part feels like overheating, so they had to shut that down. Good thing it didn't catch fire. Otherwise, that could be a big one. So regulators on that is different states are looking at it. I know that New York is looking at it, their own regulation around that. California, New York and California, usually on the forefront of these type of safety regulations. So you got local jurisdiction, you got fire department, fire marshals getting involved, then you got insurance companies. We know that by our work with Volta Energy, they're very close to some of the folks in New York, regulation side, and we're actively doing testing work and stuff like that, for the state of New York. So we know that's coming in. Another part of e-mobility is electric aviation. Lots of activities around eVTOL and so forth. We know that for the European regulation, the electric aviation has their safety requirements for each battery pack. You need to test it with 3 battery cells in the pack going to thermal runaway, and to prove that with 3 cells going to thermal runaway, your battery pack is safe from propagation internally. Internally you can propagate, but you can't propagate to the next module and bring the plane down. And to have 3 cells in a module to deterministically go into thermal runaway reliably and etc., and to really be a real life kind of a sample case for a real life situation is not easy, and that's where some of our technologies come in and then that can help the customer solving these kind of problems. But yeah, so those are kind of the regulations that I'm aware of that's coming in. Another one is transportation. This is something that we actually have worked on really a lot with the Department of Transportation to get the special permits for recycle batteries, prototype batteries, and what they call DDR batteries. DDR stands for damaged, defective, and recall batteries. So anytime your product, like your iPhone, tablet, and so forth, and also your power tools, once they become used, and then the state of charge and the state of safety for your battery inside those products become unknown because they're not new anymore, right? So they could be 100% charged. So when you need to ship it to other people or ship it back to the manufacturer for recall or repair, or when you go to recycling, that shipment needs to have Department of Transportation permit because that product become a hazmat product. You need a permit for that. So we, because of our work with NASA on the International Space Station, we've proven that that's the most effective kind of a containment solution available to prevent a cell-to-cell propagation. And then we take that technology and work with Department of Transportation to demonstrate how safe that technology is for laptops, commercially available batteries for power tools, and so forth, up to 2.1 kilowatt hour in capacity. And last year we received special permits to use our solution to ship all these batteries from in ground shipment, a rail, boat, and in some cases air shipment as well. So that is also on the regulation side, right? And then that has allowed us to do relationship or establish partnership with Heritage Battery Recycling, now Retrieve Technologies, the largest lithium battery recycling company in North America, to provide this as the containment of choice for all their OEM customers for recycling, return products, DDR, and prototype batteries. So that's an example of regulation plus technology enable mass market adoption.
Okay, very, very clear. Before I ask just a few final questions, a reminder for everybody dialed in, if you would like to ask anything, please type it in using the Q&A function in Zoom. You mentioned second half of 22 as the anticipated timetable for having some commercialization milestones. So to be clear, do you anticipate starting to generate revenue from actual automotive industry sales before the end of this year?
Actually, on the revenue generation side, we have been revenue generating over the last couple of years. 2020 was kind of a tough year, because COVID and everything. But last year, as we returned, last year 2021, as everybody kind of returned to more normal activities, we really saw a big jump, anywhere between 200% to 400% year-over-year growth for our business in 2021. And then, more recently in Q4, we started announcing some of these larger scale commercial wins. So, for example, Lockheed Martin, we announced this kind of a multi-year partnership with them. The initial contract was $500,000 and we expect that to pick up obviously in 2022. The Volta Energy, we have been doing design activity for them on the energy storage side for 18 months plus. They are very bullish on the product. They publicly talked about they expect to do about 1,000 units for 2022, and then forecast to ramp up to 50,000 units by 2023. And our initial order with them was $1.6 million, starting to be delivered in 2022. So that's another commercialization example. We actually expect that to revenues to start coming in the Q1 of this year. So a second half of this year, as you mentioned, we expect a lot of these things to ramp up into second half, as well as launch of new products such as a cell check product. Our recycling technology product, we announced a partnership with Retrieve and also Clarios in Q3 of last year. And then we see immediate revenue generation from that, although it's pretty small. But we expect that to ramp up in first half of 2022, and hopefully really ramping up in the second half of 2022, because we're engaged a lot of design activity and testing with their OEM customer right now. So those are some of the expectation for revenue ramp across a number of these customer segments. In terms of EV, that's a much longer term design activity. But we haven't really talked about what our expected ramp on the EV segment is. But stay tuned. Hopefully, we can have something in the near future on the EV activity side.
Okay, and to be clear, are you going to be selling directly to the battery manufacturers, the kind of LG Panasonic crowd, or will it be a different customer base for you?
Yeah, our typical customer base is the end customer, the end OEM that buys the battery cell from the cell manufacturers, the LGs and Panasonic, and they put them into a battery pack. So we sell to the end OEM, whether they put the battery pack themselves or they subcontract it out to another ODM on the other side. That's kind of their supply chain. But our customer base is the end customer OEM.
Okay, the automaker.
Yes.
You referenced a little bit earlier. Eventually the lithium-ion battery industry aims to switch to solid-state technology, and recognizing that's not going to be anytime soon, and indeed, nobody knows the exact timetable. But supposing that companies like QuantumScape, Solid Power commercialize solid-state technology sometime later this decade, will the automakers continue to need your product, or will the issue of fire risk go away altogether?
Yeah, great question. I think first of all, on the solid state side, some of the more optimistic estimates that we've seen is 2024, 2025 pilot production into end of the decade into volume. I think Bloomberg had an estimate that if all things go well, solid state will be something like 5% of auto OEM volume by 2030. And there's also other players in this, such as SES, that is kind of a hybrid solid, so it's kind of a thick gel solution. Everybody's trying to solve the three problems for batteries: higher energy density, and faster charging capabilities, and safety. And this is really kind of a tug of war on three different angles, right? So you kind of sacrifice one for the other. So the higher the energy you're going to have, the more energy you pack into it, and the more dynamite it's or more dynamic the explosion will be. So so I think that even at some of the most optimistic scenarios, solid state does become a mainstream product by end of this decade. You still have about a 8-year run rate into this. Number one. Number two, you still have all these batteries between now and then. Even you get to that point to move all to solid state from liquid electrolyte and current chemistry would take another 5 to 10 years. So you still have a lot of activities around consumer electronics, energy storage, and other products that will still have this problem built in for the next 10, 15 years. Even after that, you still have these products from the last 15 years kind of forward looking back, that those products needs to be recycled, needs to be shipped, needs to be transported, storaged. So you still need to have a solution to solve those problems. So we don't see this particular problem going away for at least 10, maybe even 15 years. So even if solid state, really catches on. That being said, we're also working on our own solution to address the solid state problem. We talked about our development activity around inside a battery with our carbon fiber structure to address the first two problems, which is energy, improve the energy density inside the battery, as well as fast charging capabilities. Especially the second one, fast charging capabilities. A big bottleneck for that is overheating. When you charge it too fast, too much current going through the electrical and the thermal resistance inside the cell, overheats the cell and then introduce different problems. So we think there might be a way for our carbon fiber inside to solve that problem. So we have been actively doing that development. We are expecting to show more data around that in first half of 2022. And then see how that works and show how that works with existing chemistry as well as solid state electrolyte chemistry. So we want to be relevant in provide solution in current chemistry and in solid state chemistry as well.
Okay, we covered a lot of ground in the last 40 minutes or so. So let me thank Michael Mo, CEO of KULR Technology Group. Appreciate you being with us. Appreciate everybody who dialed in. And if you have any questions, please give us a call at Raymond James. Have a great rest of the day and a good weekend. Take care.